When you don't need the word was is when it's telly, when it's passive, when it's, all these things that take the wind out of the sails of your drama. And so, like the first one on 14, normally when you have a was ing verb, it's stronger to edit. So in other words, instead of chunks of concrete slammed into the car I was hiding behind, it's just stronger to write chunks of concrete slammed into the car I hid behind with such force, so on and so forth.
Releasing your inner dragon.
So, today we have got another fantabulously brave human being who is willing to put their work out there on the internet for us to critique for the benefit of everyone. Drake, why does it take so much bravery to put your stuff out there?
So, it's funny because I think it was Hemingway. He said, it's easy to be a writer. All you have to do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed. Like, you really are pouring your soul on the page. It's a part of you. We are artists. And so it's a reflection of us. It's us being vulnerable to the world. It literally is kind of a window into our soul. So when somebody brings something to us and we're like, hey, so you author intruded in this paragraph, and since you're not using that as a plot device, it weakens your story because author intrusion does this, this, and this, and this is why it's weakened. What they hear is, hey, this part of your soul sucks. And nobody wants to hear that. It hurts. It's just painful. And so that's why, and me and you are the same way. Even though we're very used to it, there's still that millisecond of like, how dare you? Oh, right. This is not my soul. But there's still that millisecond, even after years of getting critiqued and after really buying into the concept of the people are just here to try and make you a better writer. We're not attacking you. We're not disparaging you. We're not treating you as if you're less of a human being than us because you author intruded in this paragraph. Like, even after years of understanding that, it's still, there's that twinge of, ow, like, so yeah, it's tough. It is. But the one last thing I'd like to say is there's only two ways to get feedback as a writer. And yes, this is a little public, but not really. The two ways are in a writer's group, where it's a group of people who are all there trying to do the same thing. Everyone's trying to improve. Everyone's trying to become a better writer. Everyone knows you're trying to become a better writer. And nobody cares. Nobody cares how bad of a writer you are today because everybody's trying to be a better writer tomorrow. And no one will remember your mistakes. So even here, you could say this is public, but really it's still, 1,200, 1,500 writers that are kind of in a little private writing group. It's just, on YouTube.
And also it's not like your name is attached to this. So,
right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And it's all completely anonymous other than me and you.
Yeah.
However, the only other way to get feedback is after you publish your thing and it goes up on Amazon and you get a bunch of 1-star reviews. And here's the thing, when you're in a writer's group or with us, we're brutal, but we're not mean. We're not attacking anybody. We're really legitimately trying to show them how to do it, in a different way or a better way that we feel better about it or whatever. The people that are going to give you 1-star reviews on Amazon want to hurt you. They're trying to hurt you. They're absolutely attacking you. And those things are public. They're not only public, but they last forever. They can never be taken down, no matter how vile they are. And third, they're 100% not only attached to your name, but to your product that you're trying to sell. So basically, it's like a disgruntled customer sitting out the doors of your business, and every single customer that walks up to your door, they go, oh, you want to look at, no, those people suck. Don't go in there. They suck. I hate everything about them. You're going to hate everything about them. Let me tell you why you're going to hate everything about them. I would much rather get critiqued in a little bit more private environment that nobody's going to remember anything about, 5 minutes from now, other than maybe what we learned, than to get critiqued the other way. Yes. So while it hurts, if your aspiration is to eventually put your stuff out there for public consumption, then you only have two options on how to get feedback on your writing. And that's it. And while both hurt, the other one is permanent and public.
Yeah. My genuine advice to you is, if you're a writer, do what this brave writer did. Send your work to somebody who doesn't love you, who can give you real advice.
And I promise you, neither me nor Marie love you. I mean, we do love you. We love you for being here. We love
you're
you
a viewer and,
being a subscriber.
Yeah.
All that things. And if you're not a subscriber, then you don't get our love unless you subscribe. Like, it's free. just click. But
we definitely are unbiased when it comes to these critiques. So yes. I'm going to share my screen.
Please do. So if you're listening at home on one of the podcast platforms, you can't see this. So we will try to keep in mind that there are listeners out there that can't see what we see. But I highly recommend that you go over to YouTube. You can watch, we're sharing the screen. You'll be able to see it. You'll be able to read along with us. And it will make it a little bit more enjoyable for you. And if you're going to take the time to go over YouTube, just go ahead. Even if you don't use YouTube much, just click that subscribe button, because like, people just don't understand how much that actually helps us. And I think it's only like 20% of our viewers, 25% of our viewers are actually subscribed to us. All right. So as always, neither one of us have read or looked or prepped or thought or done anything about this. We're just going to come in blind and we're going to see what we see. Oh, do you want to turn on line numbers before we begin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Continuous. All right. I will start by reading. My dream of becoming a superhero died when I was kissed by the curse of death. It started like any other day, until a mad scientist decided to rob the First National Bank of Harrowfell. The mad scientists were some of the only villains insane enough to actually commit crimes in broad daylight, even in a city protected by the Centurions. Yet somehow it happened every few months. I should have run when the alarms blared, but I didn't. After all, powers were supposed to emerge in your late teens, triggered by adrenaline or danger. I figured maybe this would be the moment I become a superhero. From behind a row of cars, I watched the mad scientist pull out a contraption, some kind of gun with tubes glowing with swirling patterns. He fired, and a thick blue liquid splattered against the bank's exterior. Nothing happened at first, just the sound of it hissing like eating through stone. Then the entire bank front exploded, sending debris and blue liquid flying in every direction. I'm going to pause there because I have things to say. So, but Drake, do you have things to say?
I'll start here, because I don't usually. I'm not known for saying a lot of nice things. So, and it's not that I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. I just say nice things when I feel like they deserve it. I really like that opening line.
Yeah, me too.
I really do. It doesn't get more poignant than, man, I really thought I was going to be a superhero until I died. Yeah. Yeah. So I just thought that was a really good
first line too.
Like that a lot. What do you got overall? I got a few line edits.
So overall, I actually quite like the introduction. I think that the first line is fantastic. Like, that is a great first line. It's a great opener to a book. The first paragraph is fine. It's tally, but it's fine given the context of the first line, right? Because it's now setting us up for how did this kiss of death actually happen, and that's interesting, and therefore carries us straight through the little bit of talliness of setup. And it clearly sets up a fairly interesting world. There's mad scientists, there's centurions, and your powers come online in your teens, triggered by adrenaline and danger. Like, all of that is fine.
Yeah, I wrote for the first paragraph, telly, but with purpose.
Yeah.
So, I've talked about this before, where one of the things I hate about American cinema is they spend at least 45 minutes trying to convince you of the reality of this world that you're about to go in. And then that cuts basically half the time out of the movie where they can actually do the movie. Then you go to Chinese cinema And in the like first minute and a half, they go, "This is the way the world works. Deal with it." And then the movie starts. Like it's just this voiceover of, in the future, people were turned into superheroes by this, and then that's it. You have to buy into it because I just told you what it was like. I don't need to spend 45 minutes convincing you that Superman, came to this planet from Krypton. Stop.
Yeah.
So sometimes tally works really well.
And that's what I feel about those first two paragraphs. I feel that they're tally, but they're good tally.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that you need to make that immersive at all. I think it's a great little setup to go into the events that led to this curse of death, which is great. So my first negative comment comes in the paragraph starting on line 9. So the problem with this paragraph is not that we're now moving into, I feel that we are now moving into more immersive, more showy, which is good. The problem is it is very filtery.
Mm-hmm.
It's filtery, and it's got a lot of generic, wasted words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, weak
So,
verbs.
and I'll explain what I mean. Nothing happened at first. Okay. Obviously, I mean, that is such a non sequitur. It's such a waste of words
Mm-hmm.
to say that. When you could have, like, he fired a thick blue liquid splattered against the bank's exterior. It bubbled, it stuck there like an inert, what's going on, rather than saying nothing happened, which is just generically telling me nothing happened. Like, paint the picture.
Yeah.
Is the liquid sliding off slowly without doing anything, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and the second half of that, is
Yeah.
another note that I had, which is just the sound of it hissing like it was eating through stone. How about it hissed and popped as it ate through the stone? So much more active, because it's actually eating through the stone. So it's not like it was like it was eating through stone.
Yeah. It
Or
ate through
whatever.
stuff.
It's doing something. It's active. It's actively doing something. So a lot of wishy-washy words. Just to go back, you said it, the filter. I want to explain that. So on 9, we have I watched. So when we diagram this sentence, the reason why filtering is bad is we need to understand that our subject and our action are the most important part of the sentence, because that's what the reader focuses on. And it's called the subject and action because it is the first thing that the reader is going to paint in their mind. And so in this sentence, I'm saying, hey, reader, look at me as I'm looking at something that is way more important than anything else. You must look at me as I'm looking at something. Don't look at what's cool. Don't look over there. Look at me, because I'm important. And it's just like, from behind the cars, mad scientist pulled out a contraption, some kind of gut. Like, I don't need to look at you.
Yeah. So in this case, actually, the thing is, this filter is actually also hiding what the protagonist is doing,
Right.
which is a problem, right?
Right.
So what you actually want to do, and that makes the sentence itself a run-on sentence because of the amount of information crowded into it. Because we have the narrator who's hiding behind a car, watching the scientist who pulls out a contraption, some kind of gun with tubes. Okay, that is a lot of information packed into a single sentence. It would be better to be like, I ducked behind a row of cars peeking over the windshield, right? That puts the narrator into an active position. We know where he is. Then the mad scientist pulled out a contraption, some kind of gun with tubes glowing in swirling patterns, something like that. Although I would probably reverse it and go with the swirling patterns first. Or get the swirling patterns in earlier, and I'll tell you why. The information at the start of the sentence makes more impact than the information at the end of the sentence on the reader. And the really cool part of this gun is the fact that it's got glowing tubes with swirling patterns. If you think about how you would see that, right? You can maybe, like, I would maybe even split it. I watched the mad scientist pulled out a contraption. Tubes glowed with swirling patterns connecting to the butt of a gun, or connecting to a plastic gun butt or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But that's just, yeah.
The only thing that I would just give an alternate view of, because you're 100% right on, especially the gun, but I'm going back to the placing the character. We already kind of have placed the POV. I should have run when the alarms blared, but I didn't. If I was going to expand on something, that's what I would expand on. Something like I just stood in the middle of the street like a dumbstruck deer in headlights or whatever, to get cliche. And then that places me, and I don't need to do it when I get to the scientists doing what they're doing. So I've already set me where I'm at, and now I don't have to say I watch. And there's a reason why people knee jerk toward filtering. I watched, I heard, I saw, I felt, and it's because they always go, well, but how does the reader know that it was me who was watching them if I don't tell them? You're in first person, which is a limited POV, which means everything that is seen, felt, heard, smelt, dealt is all done by the POV. Like, no one else can see anything but the narrating character. So I don't need to say the narrating character saw it, because he's the only one that can, or she's the only one that can, period. End of discussion. So we just don't need those filters for the most part. Every once in a while.
The only time when you do need filtering, like from a purely reader perspective, not for the other reason, is if you are for some reason omniscient in some kind, then you do sometimes need to filter, because you need to make it clear who's doing the watching.
But omniscient is more telly, and filtering is telly. So that's just kind of the
100%.
Because in omniscient, you're not really grounded with a camera. You're just floating and seeing everything simultaneously. Whereas in limited, first person or third person limited, you're actually grounded inside of a character's head. And so therefore that character becomes the camera, and I don't need to say I watched. Yeah. The only time in limited that I think that you need to filter is when the character is actually the important thing to look at. I don't want you looking at anything else. I want you looking at the character. So, the one that I have in my class, my show don't tell class, it's starts off with dialogue, and it says, "I'm sorry, Drake, we can't be together anymore," Dylan said as he stood and walked away. Or Dylan said, "I watched as he walked away." Whatever. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't, whatever. And yeah, it's all filtering, because I don't care about Dylan walking away. Don't look at Dylan walking away. He's worthless at this point. Look at me. Look at me and my pain and my misery, and wallow in that. That's what you need to look at. So it comes down to control. It comes down to understanding that a sentence is about forcing the reader to pay attention to what you need them paying attention to. And so, like in this line 9, I don't need to look at you. I need to look at the mad scientist and the contraption that he's pulling out, not you watching him do all that stuff. And so it really just is understanding how to diagram a sentence. And diagramming, I know, is a terrifying word that, because we have all those jokes and jives and lines and circles and all this crazy stuff. But honestly, you don't need a diagram much. Really, the main two things you need to be able to do is pull out your subject and action. If you can pull out your subject and action, that's 90% of what you need to know about diagramming to be a professional writer. And that's easy.
That and pronouns. Someday we're going to do an episode exclusively about the grammar rules of pronouns.
Last night I did that in writers group.
Oh my goodness, do people use pronouns wrong?
Yeah. Well, last night we had somebody, and I get it. They were doing the clever thing where, like, in the 4th paragraph, the character looked at a wanted poster of themselves and read their name on it. And so the writer was like, but that's how I'm going to cleverly get the reader the name of this character. And I'm like, yeah, you're writing in limited, which means I'm in the head of the narrator, and you're telling me that I don't know my own name, which is crazy. But since he started that way, it's him and another dude in this scene. And so we get the dude's name, like John or whatever, and then we get he. And so it literally, when you read it and replaced the pronouns with that, it was John did this, and then John did that, and then John did this, and John also did that, and John kicked him in the face, and John took the boot in the face and groaned, and then John stepped on his fingers, and then John felt his fingers crunch under the boot's weight. Like, no, you can't start with he's when it's 2 he's in the room, and you don't have another name.
Yeah.
So it just lost everything.
Yeah. But yeah, so someday we're going to talk about pronouns and how the antecedent and precedent rules work.
Yes.
Because people get that wrong.
They do. And the funny thing is that once you once you just kind of get sensitive to it, you don't really need to know the rules.
Yeah.
It'll feel wrong to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like most English speaking people do not know that there is an order to adjectives. There's actual rule for that. But it sounds wrong when you break the rule, whether you know the rule or not.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
if you hear the old white little lady went to the store, and you're like, okay, that sounds awful. What is that? Because there's rule for it. You know, we say the little old white lady.
So most grammar rules are kind of instinct, and it's fine. Like most
Yeah.
people talk, you know, English. English is like at least 5 languages in a trench coat, you know. I once heard a linguist describe English as the only language that will follow other languages down dark alleyways to cosh them over the head for spare change and grammar, you know.
Yep.
And that's 100%, that's English, like spare vocabulary and grammar. And that's fine. So you can speak English in a million different ways, but when you write it, you need to be aware of the grammar rules.
Yeah.
You need people to be able to consume your words in the way that you meant them to be.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
So I got 2 more things, one overall and just one little minor
Yes.
edit. So line 5, so commas are, I don't understand why people don't understand commas, because comma rules are so easy. You always use a comma here, except for when this case is happening, then you never use one unless you want to use one, and then you can if you so choose, but you don't have to. Like, what's so complicated about that? However,
we haven't started on the Oxford comma yet.
Yeah. However, yeah, somebody in the chat wrote comma sense. It's just comma sense. That's a good one. I'm going to steal that one. However, and it doesn't work all the time, but there are some things in English, again, that just sound right. And so one of the general rules that you can kind of use, and in the writer's room last night, I had another piece where we talked about this. There was an entire paragraph where commas were in the wrong part. It was in the middle of a sentence, like 5 sentences in a row. It was really weird. But one rule of thumb, it's not the rule, it will not work every single time. But if you naturally pause in a sentence that you're reading, it probably gets a comma. So like on line 5, you read, yet somehow it happened every few months. You didn't read yet, somehow it happened every few months.
Yeah. That's
so technically the comma goes at the end. It would not be grammatically incorrect to put it where it's at, because of the fact that you're trying to say, I want you to read it, yet somehow it happened every few months, because that's what this does. So I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just using this as a teaching moment. You could also grammatically correct, put commas on both sides of the somehow, yet somehow it happened every few months, because that's what a comma does. It creates a little pause.
But look at what that looks like.
Yeah.
Like aesthetically, that doesn't look right.
I mean, it depends on how I want the reader to read it. You know, if it's the voice, if the character has that voice where they're like, yet somehow, like if they break these things up and I want to get that cadence and I want the reader to kind of feel that cadence, I might do that. I've never had a character that did that, but it's not grammatically incorrect to write yet, comma, somehow, comma, it happened every few months. However, the way you read it, which I think is the way most people are going to read it, is yet somehow it happened every few months.
It happened every few months.
So yet somehow, comma, it happened every few. And again, this is not wrong. I'm not saying that it is.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's abnormal for the common way to say this.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I'm surprised you haven't thrown out there, we're technically starting off in a flashback. And it's not a terrible one, but to avoid it, you could easily transition in a one-line thing into a flashback, and then just write it in the present past tense. So, yet somehow it happened every few months. For me, it happened last week. I, should have run, because now you've got that transition line, and now you can write it as if it's happening now. And he basically gets there. So this is not egregious, which is probably why you didn't even notice it, because it's not egregious. But, if I was editing this, I would request that the writer think about putting a transition line in there between 5 and 6, and that just eases the reader into that past moment of the story from where we were in the first 2 paragraphs. But once we do that transition, we can now just write it in the past tense of the now.
So the reason why I haven't been all over this piece for being a flashback is because that first line is really, really great enough to justify
Yeah.
giving me the context building up to it. It's like that, because what does kissed by the curse of death mean? Does it mean I actually died, or does
Right.
it mean like some it's like a Death Note kind of situation? Like what does this mean? And the thing is, it's like that. It's like the Breaking Bad thing where you see the teddy bear,
Yeah.
right? It's interesting.
Yes.
How did we get to the point where a teddy bear is cartwheeling across the desert?
Right.
You're not setting me up for like you're not getting me invested in what the character is right now. Because this is it. This is actually exactly it. Okay. Normally, what a flashback does, or what this borrowing tension from the future does, is it invests me in what the character is doing right now. All right.
And
And
then
then
leaves
instead
it.
of telling me what the character's doing right now, it leaves me on a cliffhanger to take me back into a past I don't care about.
Right.
What that line does is it invests me in how did we reach this point? Not what
Yes.
happens next, but how did we reach this point? And
It's
that's why this flashback works.
it's also timeless. There is no
Yeah.
real time to it, as opposed to, I sat looking out at the ocean, wondering what it would feel like to get eaten by the sharks that I saw swimming beneath my feet.
Yeah.
Although last month, it's like, but I want to know what happened with the you sitting looking at the sharks. Why are we
Yeah.
going last month? I don't care about last month. I want you were somewhere. And that
Yeah.
first line is not grounded to anything. It's this esoteric statement that has no place, it has no time, it has no anything. So yeah, and that's why I said just a little transition line, in my opinion, would just
Yeah.
avoid you ever having to even because the flashback would be the transition line, and then that's it. You wouldn't be in a flashback, you'd be in the now.
Yeah.
So
And I think it's very important. I just want to emphasize this point because a lot of my objections to flashbacks is that they leave the present on a cliffhanger, right? Like the egregious one that you talk about, which is the superhero TV series. I
yes,
can't remember which one.
it
But
was
that one,
agents of shield,
yeah, Agents of Shield. They're in a plane, they're dropping, and they rip the plane's wings off or whatever, right?
an
Right at the beginning
explosion
of the
happens
episode.
out the side. Yeah, but
Yeah. And then they go like 24 hours earlier.
yes,
So they put you in a situation that needs a resolution. Then they leave you on that cliff edge and try to pretend that you care how you reach the cliff edge. When all that you're actually interested in is in what happens when you go over the cliff edge.
there's that one, and then the other
This,
one I hate is the hero opens the door, gets shot in the face, and dies
yeah,
12 hours earlier. And it's like, now why do I care? He's gonna die.
yeah,
Like I don't care anymore.
yes,
So that's the
exactly.
other side of it. Those are
So
the two that
when you show the reader exactly what's going to happen, or you leave them on a cliff edge in the present, you're doing it wrong.
mm-hmm.
What this author did was they gave us a piece of context, but it isn't leaving me um in a cliffhanger state. It's leaving me interested in how did that
Yeah. How did we
event
get
play
there?
out and what do these things mean?
You know what?
And that's why this works.
That right there is the encapsulation of it. The
Yeah.
ways we were talking about before that we don't like, and again, this is all subjective, it's all our opinions. You could love it, whatever. Those crap, I lost it. I went down the apologizing for having an opinion thing and I derailed myself. Those, oh, that's what it was. Those show me the end. And now you're just trying to get me there and you think that I'm interested in it. This one makes me curious of how to get there. So the first way makes you want to know what is happening at the moment that you're leaving me. And the other way makes me curious about how do we get there. And that is a huge difference. So this line makes me curious about how do we get there. So therefore, I'm willing to take that ride with you, as opposed to like at the beginning of the first John Wick movie, where his car hits the little concrete wall and he gets out and he's all bloodied. And he lays down and he watches the video of his wife. And it's like, yeah, now I want to know what happens now. Like now I'm invested in how does he survive this? What happens? You know, all this stuff, not how he got to the point where he was shot. I don't care about that. Not that it wouldn't be interesting, but that's the mistake that I think a lot of storytellers make is they think that I'm now just because I saw John Wick get out of the car shot and watch a video of his dead wife, that now I'm interested in how to get to that point, as opposed to, yeah, but no, I just want to see how he survives now. Like what happens to him now because he's bleeding out. That's
I know
interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we're going to get there. So,
yeah,
but this isn't. There's not enough
like
information. Yeah,
yeah.
It's this
And that's why I
esoteric
didn't
thing.
ping, and that's why I didn't ping this author on the flashback because I was like, this works.
Right. No, it does. And that's why I said it's fine. I would just one line of a transition would mean you would never have to worry about that you're in a flashback.
The one thing I do want to mention is what was brought up in the peanut gallery. The world building feels a little sloppy, but I'm willing to let it slide on the principle of it might be a kind of Terry Pratchett style of world building. You know, calling them mad scientists, for example. Like that. Like I feel like there should probably be an in-world term for that. I feel like calling them mad scientists is maybe a little fourth wall breaky.
So there is over these last 10, 12 years, there's been a rise of superhero pros and a lot of superhero role-playing games. And mad scientists have actually become a class like fighter or cleric or mage.
Okay.
So in the industry, like in the genre, it is what it is. And so in the genre, I don't think anybody's going to be thrown up by that. But I can 100% get your point on if you're just not someone who reads a lot of superhero prose, then it feels like campy, like you're doing a Terry Pratchett thing. But I didn't pick up anything in any way. And as far as
I don't read a lot of superhero prose. I'm sorry.
Right. And I've got a really good friend who that's his living. He just writes superhero prose. So, it depends on what you're used to, but I didn't get a campiness out of this. And 3 paragraphs in, I'm not looking for the world to be established yet.
Yeah.
So I don't mind, like, hey, there's mad scientists and there's something called centurions and it's superhero because I wanted to be a superhero. And I think that's enough world building for me. And again, this is all super subjective. So it just depends on.
And I agree. Like, if it's a genre thing, it's a genre thing. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I want to highlight one more thing.
Yep.
No one needs the word then.
Almost never.
Almost never. It's like started. You almost never need the word started. You almost never need the word then. Go.
I was going to say the reason why it's so dumb is you're going, okay, so this thing happened, and then just so you're aware, this other thing happened. Now I know they're written in sentence order, and I know you're going to read them with the first sentence first and the second sentence second, but just in case you don't, like maybe you read that second sentence first, I don't know why, I need to make sure that you understand that the second sentence came after the first sentence, even though they're written in that order. So that's what it always is for me. It's just like, of course it happened next. Same thing with the word next.
I know why people do it. They do it to inject a pause, right? To see,
or a change, or a shift, or whatever,
or a change, or a shift, or whatever. But actually, here you really don't need it. You've got the sound of hissing.
It weakens the drama.
It just weakens it. Yeah. You've got the sound of the blue liquid hissing as it eats through stone. The entire bank front exploded. The shock of it is much more if you take the then away.
Yeah. And one of the things that he hasn't done, or she, I don't even know if it's a male or female writing this, but one of the things the author hasn't done that I preach a lot about is when I'm scene setting, I try to do one of three things. And I'm going to define a word first. When I say setting, I mean everything that isn't the narrating character. So the world, the stuff going on, the other characters, tertiary and secondary, everything is the setting. So I try to tell people to think about, build your setting throughout every single paragraph by the setting interacting with the POV interacting with the setting, or the setting interacting with the setting. And so, like in this case, you could go the entire bank exploded, or you could have it interact with the POV. I was flung off my feet as the entire bank front exploded. Like now it's interacting with me. So
Yeah.
I'm now engaged, and I'm now a part of the scene, and I'm now, being affected by the stuff that's going on. And
I
so
ducked behind the car as the
right,
boulders flew over my head, whatever.
right, exactly. If you do that, if you pay attention to your scene setting and world building, this also works for world building stuff too, and you allow to always try to take advantage of because almost everything, just like this one, the entire bank front exploded. I also have a problem with it. Entire. That's another word that I really hate. Like when the plane tilted sideways, Drake was thrown completely out the open window. It's like, good. I was worried Drake left his leg in the plane. Like, it's just a weird visual image to me. But I am hyper focused on words. But if you just constantly focus on, okay, I described this thing, but how can I describe it in a way that it's interacting with the character, or the character's interacting with it, or at least it's interacting with another thing around it. So like even here, let's say we didn't do the POV thing, the bank front exploded, sending debris and blue liquid covering the surrounding cars, and splashing on a woman and dissolving her into a goo, whatever. Like, just instead of in every direction, it's we talked about the blasé kind of words that are in here. That's another one. It's like in every direction. Like, paint me a picture. What does that mean? What am I seeing? Is it liquefying standers by? Is it knocking over cars? Is it like what? Let me see what you see in your head.
Generic terms weaken your writing because they don't give the reader the specifics that give them immersive writing.
Yeah.
So for the most part, not always, but for the most part. All right, let me continue. Chunks of concrete slammed into the car I was hiding behind with such force that it pushed the car and me several meters back, nearly crushing me between the car and the wall of Granny's sweet scoops. Relieved that I was alive and rethinking my life choices, I spotted the smear of blue liquid covering the car's hood. It hissed as it ate through the metal. If I stayed, the liquid would burn straight through and drop down on my face. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I've got a few things to say on this paragraph.
Yeah.
The first is, I'm glad the very next paragraph is the scene interacting with the narrator. That's good.
Yeah.
But it would have been, you could have done it earlier, but it
could
is
have done
good.
earlier.
I really like the rethinking my life choices. I do.
That was funny.
That was very funny.
Yeah.
But I don't like relieved that I was alive.
No.
That's
a
very...
telly. You're just telling me that what is it? So anytime, this is another one of my little teaching methods, but when you can identify tells, and it is hard to identify tells, it's really difficult. One of the ways that I try to get people to think about it is, can you turn it into a math equation? Because we don't do math, we do grammar. And so this is I equals relieved that I'm alive. Like, that's what it is. It's just a math equation. There's no emotion. There's no what it feels like. And so when you can identify the tells, fixing them is actually easy. You just ask a question. And it is a different question depending on the situation. This is an internal emotion. So we would ask the question, what does it feel like internally to be relieved that I'm alive? And there's probably a million ways to answer it, and every one of them is a show, or at least more showy than this.
Yeah.
If it was a visual thing, whatever it is, if it's a televisual thing, it's okay. What does it look, what does it look like to look at that? Or if it's a sound thing, what does it sound like? Or if it's whatever. So the question changes a little bit, but if you can turn it around and just ask that question and then answer it, what your answer is always going to be more showy than the tell.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. But as I said, the rethinking my life choices was very funny. I laughed. I don't like nearly crushing me between the car and the wall. Freaking crush me.
Yeah.
or let me duck sideways,
Yeah.
or let me dive out of the way as the car slams into the wall.
Yes.
Like,
We
nearly
talk.
is the irrelevance.
Yeah,
Like,
we talked about wishy-washy words, the
yeah,
almost, the started to, the sometimes, the nearlies, they just weaken your writing. Be
yeah.
writing, this is about drama.
Mm,
So, and ly adverbs are always used in one of three ways incorrectly. Sometimes they can be used correctly, but for the most part, there's three ways they're used correctly, and this is one of them. One of them is you've used the wrong verb. So
yes.
it didn't crush me.
Yeah.
So
Maybe it's
since I said
squeezed.
it crushed me, that's the wrong verb. So I have to use an ly adverb to weaken that verb or strengthen it sometimes. But in this case, we're weakening it. It didn't crush me because I used the wrong verb and it's too strong of a verb because it didn't do that. So I have to add a crappy ly adverb to weaken it and say, well, it nearly crushed me. So again, since we know it's a tell because ly adverbs are almost always tells, we ask the question, what does it look like to be nearly crushed? And you already did one example. There's a million different ways to write that, and all of them are going to be more engaging, more showy, more exciting, more dramatic than nearly crushed me.
You could have said it squeezed me into the wall. It
Yeah.
jolted me into the wall. I dived out of the way as it smashed into the wall. Like,
Yeah,
whatever.
the car I was hiding behind slammed against the wall, missing me by an inch or
Yeah.
by a hair or whatever, or it knocked me out of the way or like anything. I mean, there's a million ways to answer what does it look like to nearly be crushed by a car.
Yeah.
And every one of them is more showy than that.
Also, like, you're missing a hello world building opportunity here. I'm just gonna say, like, I don't know if you're gonna use it, but Granny's Sweet Scoop is a sweet shop, right?
Sounds it.
So
Maybe
if
an
a
ice cream shop.
car if a car hits a sweet shop, you're always missing an opportunity to smash into the window and have like a stream of sour worms come out or something
Yeah.
equivalent. Like jellies all over the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
um but that's just me. Like, I just love that image of like candy pouring out a window.
Yeah.
Um It hissed as it ate through the metal was fine. I could do with a little more immersion, but I mean, I do not like the final sentence of this paragraph at all. It is so blah. Like,
Yeah.
if I stayed, the liquid would burn straight through and drop down on my face.
Yeah. As
Eh,
opposed to
As opposed to what?
picking myself
Exactly.
up off the ground, I jerked to the side as the blue liquid burnt through
Yeah.
the ground below me. Again, it's just about not being telly and not being blasé.
Yeah.
I do have a few other things because I agreed with every one of those and I marked every one of those. Except for the Granny Sweet Shop. That's a good one because that's the thing, and that's really what separates so many writers is what do we want to focus on. So like I didn't think about. I mean, it's fine. I'd probably write something like slam through Granny Sweet Scoops and be done with it. But you're right. It's kind of cool for a tower of gummy worms to come slithering out onto the ground. Like that's cool. But that is what separates writers is how we look at different things and what we're going to have our readers focus on. But a couple things. First of all, I'm pretty sure if we scroll up, we've already used hissed. I think when it hit the wall.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, hissing 12. So hissed was used twice in 2 paragraphs. We have another filter with I spotted. I don't need to look at you looking at the blue liquid. Just let me look at the blue liquid. The if I stayed is just so blasé. And then the big thing that I want to talk about here is wases are red flags that you're doing something wrong. They are red flags. When every writer learns for the first time that wases are your enemy, for whatever reason, they try to then remove every single was out of their manuscript. Do not do that. You cannot write a story without the word was. I mean, you can. It's just not good. You need the word was. What you don't need the word was is, or when you don't need the word was, is when it's telly, when it's passive, when it's, all these things that take the wind out of the sails of your drama. And so, like the first one on 14, normally when you have a was ing verb, it's stronger to edit. So in other words, instead of chunks of concrete slammed into the car I was hiding behind, It's just stronger to write chunks of concrete slammed into the car I hid behind with such force, so on and so forth. A was-ing verb combination, it works every once in a while. Again, I never say never, because in creative writing, creative is the first word in creative writing, so there's always things. But most of the time when you have a was-ing verb, just edit. Now, hid obviously doesn't have an ed on it, but that is the past tense version of hide is hid. It isn't hided. I hided behind. So yes, sometimes in English we have an ed, sometimes we don't, but it's the past tense version of it as opposed to the, the ing version of it. So we don't need that was ing, was hiding. We just need hid.
That can just be hid. Yeah.
It just makes it stronger. But we have some other things in here that we can look at the was's as red flags. Relieved I was alive. That's a good red flag. And we already talked about that line being telly. And again, red flag was, I can look at it and go, wait, there's a was in this sentence. Is it telly? Oh, it is telly. Okay, great. Now I'm starting to recognize my tells. So just watch your was's. You can't write without them. The sky was blue. Sometimes the sky's just blue, and was is a linking verb there. It is your verb. The subject is sky and the verb, the action is was. That's just what it is. That's English language. Is it passive? Is it, and not passive voice? Because it's not passive voice. It's just passive. It's not doing anything. It's just being. It was blue, as opposed to, the azure sky stretched out over the horizon like a warm, fuzzy blanket. Now we have some action and some activity. It's not just was being blue. It was really cool to look at and exciting to read, as opposed to was blue. So was's are always red flags. You want to look at every sentence that has a was. I have a macro that highlights all my was's. I click it and every single was gets highlighted. And using a Boolean replace is, and I don't know if somebody told me that it's not a Boolean replace, that I'm using the wrong word, but I don't care. I've been using it for 20 years. So I'm still going to call it a Boolean replace. It's just the Drake version of that word. But using Boolean replaces, where you replace a word with the same word but highlighted, you can no longer miss them. So if you're in Word, they don't have replace anymore. It's kind of hidden, so you have to hit Control H to bring up the old find and replace box. If you just go to the find, you don't get the replace, but Control H in Word will bring up the find and replace, and you click on that is the replace side of it. And then in the top, you write was, and in the find, you write was, and you click whole word only, so it just finds was, not wash or anything that has was as a part of the word. And then when you click on replace, you write the word was, and then you go down to formatting and you choose a really obnoxious highlight color like fuchsia, and then you hit replace all, and it won't change your manuscript at all. It'll just take every single was that's a whole word and just highlight it fuchsia. And then it's really hard to not see them, because they're all fuchsia. And you go, wow, there's 5 was's in this one sentence. Maybe there's a problem there. I've read that 20 times. I didn't even notice the was's, and now there's 5. So,
and that's the other thing. Was becomes a very repetitive word. So
yes.
Yeah. All right. So let me continue. And adrenaline shot through me. For a heartbeat, all I could think was, this is it. This is the moment Damien Grimshaw becomes a superhero. Okay, so there's nothing. There isn't stuff wrong with the sentence. I just do not like colons. And you can ignore me. It's a me thing. But for me, a colon is a thing that is used in non-fiction and followed by a bullet point list. I know that's not its only use. I understand that grammatically it can be used like it's used here. I just don't like it.
So it's actually not used correctly here, because that is a thought tag. So just like a speech tag, we don't put colons. I said colon, we do a comma. So all I could think was comma, because it is a speech tag. So technically that is not used correctly in any way, shape, or form. And I agree with you. I hate colons in prose.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and the reason why I always say never. Literally, and I know I'm talking a lot about this week's critique pod, but that is the beauty of being a part of the writer's room. And I guess I should plug that. If you really want to work with me and Marie on a weekly basis to help you become a better writer, head on over to writersroom.us. You can join for free. You won't get as much as you get if you join it, behind the paywall. There's a ton of things behind the paywall, but you can get it for free, and you do get quite a bit. So if you want to work with us, that is something I highly recommend that you do. Writersroom.us, join for free. You're done. So, this week in one of my critique pods, I literally said, okay, so I hate colons in prose. I don't feel that you should ever use them. But you know what? I think you should put a colon right here in this piece. And here's why. So I actually recommend it.
Even I have used colons, fair cop I have, because there have been times when I've literally said, where I've had like a letter or whatever. It's like, when I've got a literal document or whatever.
And that's what this was.
Yeah, I'm not saying you should never have a colon. I'm not saying it never has a place, even though I don't like it.
Yes.
As I say, I've even used it myself. But
yes,
this does not.
This is incorrect. It's incorrect. It's grammatically incorrect. The other thing about it is, and some people just don't like doing it, but what you like doesn't really matter when it comes to standardized formatting. In most fiction genres now, inner monologue is expected to be italicized so that we know that it is dialogue being said inside of a character's head. Just like it's expected for quotes to go around dialogue so that we know that when we read that in our head, we imagine that they're words being said out loud.
So I hear you, but in this author's defense, this is first person. Everything's internal monologue.
100%.
And I wouldn't call this exactly internal monologue.
Well, no, that's where I was getting. Yeah. I hadn't finished, because you're 100% right. You should never write inner monologue in first person, because all of it is inner monologue. And so you don't need a thought tag, is where I was going. We don't need a thought tag because we're already in this character's head. So for a heartbeat, all I could think was, this is it. This is like, it's just one sentence. We don't even need the comma there. We just go, all I could think was, this is it. Because it's just one sentence. We don't break it up. We don't comma it. We don't colon it. We don't do anything, because it's all inner monologue. For a heartbeat is inner monologue. All I could think it was inner monologue, and this is it is inner monologue. All of it is inner monologue, since we're in first person.
So I think the ideal here would be something like for a
really heartbeat. Just for a heartbeat, comma, all I could think was lowercase this is it. All I could think was, this is it.
Yeah.
You could put a comma there. That wouldn't be grammatically incorrect either. So for a heartbeat, comma, all I could think was, comma, this is it, but lowercase this is it, because it's not a thought tag. So technically a comma there would also be grammatically correct. But the way it's written, since this writer is using a thought tag, therefore it is you are designating it as inner monologue. And so therefore that's why I went with the first, saying you got to it's industry standard now pretty much across the board to italicize inner monologue. And then I wanted to talk about the fact that it's first person, and we just don't need inner monologue in first person.
We don't need it, because everything is in first person, inner monologue.
Well, just like 25. I was such an idiot. Like the narration isn't saying that. The character's saying that in their head, because all of the narration is in the character's head. And we're just privy to that information. So so that's my speech on inner monologue. No reason to use a thought tag in first person, because there's no reason to use inner monologue in first person, because it's all inner monologue, which means they're thinking all of it.
Okay.
And this is why we say don't send us more than 1,000 words, because we are 45 minutes into this almost, and we're online.
We can spend ages on like a page.
Yeah. You can send us 1,000 words. We're just never going to get there. We don't have that kind of time.
But okay, so then we continue. But my powers didn't come. I barely escaped as the liquid burnt. Barely escaped. Come on. As the liquid burned through the metal and splashed down right where I'd been seconds earlier. Why the hell had I thought running toward danger was a good idea? I was such an idiot. Okay.
The funny thing is, if you literally cut "I barely escaped as" and just capitalize that T, The liquid burned through the metal and splashed down right where I had been seconds earlier. Like, we don't even need those first four words.
Yeah.
And it's an ly adverb. And it's
Yeah.
an ly adverb that is weakening a verb's escaped, because escaped is too strong of a verb, because I didn't just escape, I barely escaped. So it's a crappy telly ly adverb, and we just ask the question, what does that look like or feel like? And we get it. But in this case, it's super easy, because if you just cut the words, you've fixed the problem.
Yeah. There's literally no problem if you just do that.
Yeah.
The why the hell that was fun. This part's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so, we should probably take a second to talk about this for just a moment. If you want to know if you're writing really good third person limited, can you turn it into first person by only changing pronouns? So if it was Drake went into the kitchen, Drake picked up a pot, if you can change that to I went into the kitchen and I picked up a pot, you are probably doing a really good job of staying in limited. Because the problem with third person is that we get a lot of author intrusion stuff, because we think we're telling the story, as opposed to, and again, if we're writing third person omniscient, we are telling the story. But if we're trying to write in third person limited, it's the character telling the story. So therefore, the character can't know things that the narrator knows and all of that. So if you can translate your third person limited into first person flawlessly without changing any sentence structures at all, and everything sounds correct, you're probably doing a pretty good job of writing third person limited. However, if you can translate your first person into third person limited flawlessly by doing nothing but changing I to Drake, and me and my to him and he, you have failed writing first person. And it's not that you're writing first person bad. You're not. You're actually writing first person fine. It's just that you're writing first person prose. And the only advantage that first person brings to the table, in my opinion, is the character voice. In third person limited, you really can't write a third person voice. You can't give the narration a voice because it sounds weird.
You can't do this. You can't say, why the hell had he thought running toward danger was a good idea? He was such an idiot.
He was such an idiot. You can't do that.
It's weird.
It is.
But you can in first person.
Yeah. Because in third person, it feels like the narration is insulting the character. And in first person, I'm just disparaging myself.
Yeah.
And we all do that. So if you can translate it across the board the other way, then you have no character voice. And I would highly recommend, not that it's wrong, it's just that you're writing in a POV that has a bunch of limitations. First person is the most limited POV. And if we get into tenses, present tense is the most limited of the tenses. So if you're writing in first person present tense, which is so prevalent in like YA, then you're writing in the most limited POV with the most limited tense, and you're really hurting your ability to tell a story. But even if you're writing in first person past tense like this, first person is still a more limited POV than third person, which means that you are now stuck with those limitations in telling your story. There's things that you're not going to be able to do as well. So if you needed secondary, a second POV character, you really can't do that. If you have to have subplots, if you have to have parallel plots, those things are very, very difficult to tell in first person, because you're breaking the kind of the mystic reality of being inside of a character when you do that with it. Whereas with third person, you don't have those limitations. Now, Hunger Games works really well in first person present tense, because Hunger Games can't get more simplistic of a story structure. So nothing about that is going to break the Hunger Games story. But like mine and your stuff, multi POV, multi plot line, multi plot arc, multi side plots, first person would it would break us. It would literally destroy our story. So the reason why I went down that is because this is a great example of using a voice inside of first person, because you can't write, why the hell had Drake thought running toward danger was a good idea? He was such an idiot. Like, that just sounds wrong. It sounds like, wow, narrator, you're being really mean to your main character. That's kind of screwed up. Like, why are you doing that? You're a jerk, narrator. Whereas opposed to, why the hell did I run toward danger? I'm such an idiot. Like, they're like, yeah, you are. Like, you don't feel in any way, shape, or form bad about that being said. So because you can't move this from first person to third person, that lets us know that we're at least writing in some type of narrative voice. And that is a good thing.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, I've actually had a lot of good things, despite the fact that we've spoken a lot about this. This has actually got a lot of
Oh yeah,
potential.
I'll
And I'm
read
quite
this.
enjoying it.
Yeah,
So,
I'd read this.
yeah. I bolted for the nearest impact shelter, but as I neared the shelter,
Yep,
my
shelter,
stomach
shelter.
twisted. There were only a few people left, hurrying inside. Almost no queue.
Only
Yeah. Okay.
we just
So
that's another
helter
ly adverb.
skelter meets the highlight here. We've
The
got
reason why I'm just
shelter,
not waiting
shelter.
on is you're starting to see the pattern. So this
Yeah.
author uses a lot of ly adverbs that are just not needed.
Yeah.
A lot of wishy-washy words that are not needed. Um, and the thing is, taking those things out just increases the drama and increases the tension and increases the immersibility for the reader.
Hmm.
So instead of there were, and were is was, when I say was is a red flag, were is just was. So there were, oh look, I'm telling, because that's
Yeah.
were is was. Um, you know, the few people left on the streets hurried inside instead of the hurrying to get rid of the ing.
Mm.
Not that that's bad in the sentence structure that's there, but we couldn't use ing if the few
Yeah.
people left milling about in the streets. We couldn't say hurrying inside. That would be weird. We'd have to write were hurrying, but then you got a was ing or a were ing. So hurried. So yeah. And then almost just a lot of wishy-washy words.
Yeah.
It just deflate the writing just a little bit. It just doesn't make it
Take
as impactful.
Kill all the wishy-washy words. Like even if you think they're the right one, right? As a writing exercise, kill them all and see if it still makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, people think, oh, but they're gonna think that it was this or it was that. Just try and write without them. Sometimes you do want almost. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is the right word to use.
Yeah.
But when you're starting out, when you're learning, killing every weak word, every wishy-washy word, teaches you not to include it by default because we talk like this. We
Yes.
talk in almosts and ly adverbs and so on. So you have got to break that habit in your writing. And
Yeah.
then once it's broken, then you can be like, okay, now is a good place to put
Yeah.
almost in and
Because
so
here's
on.
the cool thing that I don't think a lot of people realize. We actually use two different parts of our brain in writing and speaking. When you are writing, if you're under an MRI, one part of your brain lights up, but not the speech part of your brain. And then when you are speaking, the writing part of your brain doesn't light up. So your brain can have the two different languages and keep them completely separate. It's why, when I'm teaching a class, I always say I hate making up examples out of my mouth because I've never taught my mouth how to
Mm.
speak prose. I've taught my fingers how to speak prose. And so it's really hard for my brain to shift over to my writing side of my brain, think of the sentence in a prosy way, and then let my mouth actually say it, which is why in all my classes, I have all of my examples already pre-written out because then I wrote them with that part of my brain that's trained to write prose. And I don't have to try and, finagle my mouth to speak a language that it doesn't really speak. And I've actually had people, it's so funny. I've had people come up to me after class and said, this is the best class I've ever gotten. You've taught me more than in this last hour than I've learned in the last 10 years. But man, if I just heard you speak, I would swear you couldn't write prose because you speak horribly, as far as passive voice and a lot of ly adverbs and redundancy, all the things that everyone does when we speak. And that's why, like some of your academic professors who really try to both speak it and teach it, they feel like they're not human almost. They feel like they're like this other being. And it's because they're speaking in prose. And I don't want that. I like being personable. I like people to relate to me on a verbal level. And then my writing is a completely different language.
So I think overall for this author, I would give you a lot of points for voice, a great opening line, a flashback done really well, like all of that, great, very well done. I think on a
And I like the
technical level,
story. I
and
like
I
the
like the
world. I
story.
like the.
Yeah,
I mean, we got 23 lines into it,
yeah,
which is
obviously,
normally the case.
but I would keep reading. If I'd opened this on
Mm-hmm.
Kindle, I would keep reading,
Yeah,
which is that is the tide mark you want, right? So I would keep reading, and if I liked what I read to the end of the sample, I'd buy the book.
yeah.
So, so far, so good. What I would say, though, to improve your writing is go take a look at your adverbs, go take a look at your talliness, and kill your weak words, kill your wishy-washy.
Mm-hmm. And then somebody from the Peanut Gallery did say something that I think is a really astute comment. So basically, they're, just to paraphrase, the character's voice is humorous, which is what's kind of connecting them to the character, but they feel alien in the world as much as the reader does. This feels like, and this comes back to what we were talking about earlier. If things were more personal, if the character was interacting directly with things and the things were interacting directly with character, and we had that interiority, we didn't get a lot of that. We got some snarky interiority, but we didn't get the car barely missed me and I felt this, the ooze nearly melted my face off and it made me experience this. All of that interiority is what's going to connect the reader to the character and make them feel like the character belongs as a part of this world, as opposed to, oh, this character is basically like me, they're an outsider. And so that would help with that issue there. So that's my big overall. It needs not only everything you said, the wishy-washy words, the telliness and all of that, but it needs interiority, which is the hardest thing to learn when you're going down this path. There is nothing harder.
Interiority is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But it is the magic. It is the thing that connects readers to the character. It is the thing that connects the readers to the story. Without interiority, the stories feel flat. They feel unfulfilling when you get to the end because you just didn't connect with it deep enough to actually care about it, other than superficially. I mean, it's not that you can't have, Michael Bay movies, they're fine, but you don't watch them 10 times, or at least most people don't watch them 10 times, because it's a superficial kind of climax at the end, because you never emotionally connected with the story and the characters. So therefore, when it does climax, it's just like, all right, that was cool. I'm happy to have watched the movie. I don't feel jilted, but I'm not going to rewatch it 20 times. I'm not coming back. And like you take and I know it's going to date me, but you take a movie like Titanic, which was the first big blockbuster movie that everyone's like, I saw it 382 times this week. And it's like, and why did people keep going back over and over and over? Is because they connected emotionally to the story. They connected emotionally to the characters. And that's all we have in prose. We don't get flashy explosions like Michael Bay gets on the screen. We only get the emotional connection to it. So that's my big overall, is there's just not a lot of interiority in what I read.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Well, I think that is a good place on which to end this episode. Honestly, I think the author did well. Like, I think they've got a great start. So, good job, but some things to look at.
Yeah.
And we will see you soon for another episode.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing,
plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.